I knew it was a mistake the second it happened. Not in a dramatic, life-shattering way. More like that quiet, sinking feeling in your chest when something crosses a line you can't uncross, and you realize way too late that you didn't actually want to stop it. It started with something stupid. It always does. Melvin and I had been friends for almost 2 years, but living together for the past 6 months made everything closer. Too close, probably. He was the kind of guy everyone assumed was straight without even asking, confident, a little cocky, always surrounded by girls, the type who joked too easily and touched too casually. And me? I just learned how to exist around him without giving anything away. At least I thought I had. That night didn't feel important at first. Just another Friday. We both had long weeks, him with work, me with classes, and ended up staying in, ordering food, and half watching some dumb reality show while scrolling on our phones. Normal. Comfortable. Dangerous. Because somewhere between the second beer and the third episode, something shifted. It wasn't obvious. Not like in movies. No dramatic pause, no music swelling in the background. Just little things. His leg pressing against mine and not moving. His arm brushing mine when there was plenty of space. The way his voice dropped slightly when he talked directly to me instead of at the TV. I noticed it. I just pretended I didn't. "You ever think about stuff like that?" he asked suddenly. I glanced at him. "Like what?" He gestured lazily at the screen, where 2 contestants were arguing about whether flirting with the same person counted. "I don't know," he shrugged. "Experimenting or whatever." My stomach tightened instantly. I forced a casual tone. "Not really." "You?" He didn't answer right away. Just leaned back, stretching his arms behind his head like it was nothing. "People make it a bigger deal than it is," he said. "It's just curiosity, right?" I nodded, even though my pulse had started to pick up. "Yeah," I said. "I guess." That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Because after that, the silence felt different. He wasn't really watching the show anymore. Neither was I. The air between us got heavier, like something was waiting to be acknowledged, but neither of us wanted to say it out loud. Then he laughed, quiet, almost to himself. "What?" I asked. "Nothing," he said, but he didn't look away. And that's when I knew. That same slow, creeping tension I'd read about, heard about, told myself I'd never be dumb enough to fall into, it was right there. Sitting between us on that couch. I should have gotten up. I didn't. Instead, I stayed exactly where I was, hyper-aware of everything, how close he was, how warm his arm felt against mine, how his eyes kept flicking to my lips for just a second too long. "Henry," he said after a moment, quieter now. "Yeah?" He hesitated. Actually hesitated. And that alone was enough to mess with my head, because Melvin wasn't the type to second-guess anything. "This is probably stupid," he muttered. My heart was already racing. "What is?" He looked at me then, really looked, and for a second, I forgot how to breathe. He exhaled sharply. "I want to try something." Everything in me tensed. I should have said no. I didn't say anything at all. And somehow, that was worse. Because silence? Silence is permission. He moved first. Slow. Careful. Like he was giving me time to stop him. I didn't. His hand came up to my jaw, fingers barely touching, like he wasn't even sure I was real. And then he leaned in. And just like that, it happened. The kiss wasn't aggressive. It wasn't messy or rushed. It was tentative. Soft. Like he was testing something, not taking it. Like he was waiting for me to push him away. I didn't. I kissed him back. And the second I did, everything changed. Because whatever hesitation he had, it disappeared. His grip tightened slightly, his body shifting closer, and the kiss deepened in a way that made my brain go completely blank. Weeks, months, of buried attraction hit all at once, and I stopped thinking entirely. It only lasted a few seconds. Maybe 10. Maybe less. But when he pulled back, breathing uneven, reality came crashing in hard. Shit, he muttered, immediately letting go of me. I sat there, frozen. Neither of us spoke for a second. Then he ran a hand through his hair, standing up too fast. That was a mistake. There it was. The word I'd been expecting. The one that should have snapped everything back to normal. I swallowed, forcing a small nod. Yeah. It's fine. Fine. Such an easy lie. He paced once, then stopped, like he didn't know what to do with himself. I don't know why I did that. I didn't answer. Because I knew why. And the worst part? He did too. He just didn't want to say it. Another silence fell between us. He looked at me again, different this time. Not panicked. Not exactly. Something else. Something unresolved. And then, before I could even process what was happening, he stepped closer again. Yeah, he said under his breath. Definitely a mistake. But he didn't stop. And neither did I. I wish I could say I stopped him. That I snapped out of it, laughed it off, created some distance, anything that would have kept things from going further. But I didn't. Because when Melvin stepped back in, it wasn't rushed this time. It was slower. More certain. Like something had already been decided in his head, even if he refused to say it out loud. Just, he exhaled, not quite meeting my eyes. Don't make it a thing. That should have been my warning. Instead, I nodded. And that was all it took. He kissed me again. This time it wasn't hesitant. There was still that edge of uncertainty, but underneath it was something heavier, something that had clearly been building for a while. His hand slid from my jaw to the back of my neck, pulling me closer like he didn't want any space left between us. And yeah, I let him. I leaned into it, matching him, feeling that same rush hit me again but stronger now. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It felt intentional, even if he wouldn't admit it. A few seconds turned into longer. His thumb brushed along my neck, absent-minded but grounding, like he was trying to stay present while also pretending this wasn't happening. That contradiction? I felt it in everything he did. Because the second the kiss broke again, he stepped back like he'd been burned. Damn, he muttered under his breath. I stayed where I was, heart pounding. Melvin! He shook his head immediately. No. No, we're not. He cut himself off, dragging a hand down his face. This is exactly what I didn't want. I frowned. Then why? I don't know. He snapped, then softened almost instantly. I don't know, Henry. It just happened. That wasn't true. Things don't just happen twice. We both knew that. The room went quiet again, but it wasn't the same kind of silence as before. This one was heavier, filled with everything we weren't saying. I watched him pace a little, restless energy rolling off him. He looked like he was trying to convince himself of something. It doesn't mean anything, he said finally, more to himself than to me. There it was again. That line. The one he needed. I should have pushed back. Called it out for what it was. But instead I just asked, Then why do you keep doing it? He stopped moving. For a second, I thought he'd brush it off again. Make a joke. Change the subject. But he didn't. He looked at me, really looked, and something in his expression shifted. Less defensive. More honest, even if he hated it. I said it was a mistake, he repeated quietly. Yeah, I said. You did. A pause. Then I added, But you're still here. That landed. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened, in the way his eyes flicked down for a second before coming back up to meet mine. And then, almost like he was proving a point to himself more than anything, he stepped forward again. Yeah, he said, voice lower now. Guess I am. And just like that, we were right back in it. Only this time, there was no pretending it was accidental. His hands were firmer, more deliberate. He didn't hesitate when he pulled me closer, didn't second guess the way he leaned in again. The tension between us had shifted into something heavier. Something that felt impossible to ignore now. But even then, even while he was kissing me like that, I could feel it. That disconnect. Like part of him was here with me, and part of him was already pulling away. When he finally stopped again, his forehead rested lightly against mine, both of us breathing uneven. "This is," he started, then let out a quiet, almost frustrated laugh. "This is such a bad idea." I didn't disagree. "Yeah," I said softly. Neither of us moved. For a moment, it felt like we were both waiting for the other person to end it. To be the one who stepped back first and called it what it was. But neither of us did. Instead, he exhaled slowly, eyes closing for a second like he was gathering himself. "Last time," he said. I knew immediately that wasn't true. He probably did too. But still. I nodded. "Last time," I echoed. And somehow, that made it worse. Because this time, there was no confusion left. No mistake to hide behind. Just a choice we were both making, fully aware it was going to complicate everything after. And still not stopping. Last time lasted maybe 30 seconds. That's how long we managed to pretend we had control over it. Because the moment his lips were on mine again, that whole idea fell apart instantly. It wasn't softer this time. It wasn't careful. It felt inevitable. Like we'd already crossed the line twice, and now there was no point pretending we could walk it back. His hands weren't tentative anymore. They held on to me like he'd already made up his mind, even if he refused to admit it out loud. And that was the part that messed with me the most. Because every time he pulled me closer, every time he kissed me like that, I could feel how real it was. But the second there was space between us, he'd try to undo it. Like he was constantly switching between two versions of himself, and neither one fully won. At some point, we ended up standing instead of sitting. I don't even remember when that happened. Just that my back hit the wall, and he followed without hesitation, closing whatever distance was left between us. "Melvin," I started, not even sure what I was going to say. He didn't stop, but he did pause just enough to look at me. That look, it wasn't confusion anymore. It was conflict. "I know," he muttered, almost frustrated. "I know." But he didn't move away. Instead, his forehead pressed lightly against mine again, like he was grounding himself. "This isn't," he started, then shook his head. "This isn't who I am." I held his gaze. "Then why does it feel like it is?" That hit harder than I expected. I saw it in the way his expression tightened, in the way his hand flexed slightly against my side like he didn't know whether to let go or pull me closer. "You don't get it," he said quietly. "Then explain it to me." Another pause. Longer this time. His eyes dropped for a second, then came back up. "I've never..." He cut himself off, exhaling sharply. "I've never wanted this before." I didn't look away. "But you do now." He didn't answer. Didn't deny it either. And that silence said more than anything else could have. For a second, everything just stopped. No movement, no talking, just the weight of that truth sitting between us. Then he let out a quiet, almost defeated breath. "Yeah," he admitted. It was barely above a whisper. But it was enough. Something shifted again after that. Not in a dramatic way, but the tension changed. Less confusion, more awareness. Like we both finally acknowledged what was happening instead of pretending it wasn't real. And somehow, that made it harder to stop. Because now, when he kissed me again, there was no hesitation left to hide behind. It was intentional. Still conflicted, still messy, but intentional. His hand slid up slightly, fingers brushing along my neck again, and this time he didn't pull back right away. He stayed there, like he was allowing himself to feel it instead of immediately shutting it down. I felt it too. Every second of it. And for a moment, I stopped thinking about consequences. About what this would mean tomorrow. About how complicated everything was about to get. I just let it happen. But of course, reality doesn't stay quiet forever. It crept back and slowly. Through the way his movements started to hesitate again. Through the way his breathing changed, not just from the moment, but from something heavier settling in. And then, just like before, he pulled back. Not abruptly this time. Slower. Reluctant. "This can't keep happening," he said, voice low but firm. I studied his face. "You said that already?" "I mean it this time." I almost smiled at that. Not because it was funny, but because we both knew how weak that sounded. "You meant it before, too," I said. His jaw tightened. "Henry!" "No, seriously." I cut in, not harsh, just honest. "You keep saying it's a mistake. That it doesn't mean anything. But you're the one who keeps coming back." That landed again. Harder this time. Because now there wasn't any denial left to hide behind. He stepped back a little, finally putting space between us. And for the first time since this started, he actually stayed there. Running a hand through his hair, he looked away, like he needed distance just to think straight again. "I don't know what you want me to say," he admitted. "Start with the truth. I don't know what this is." That, at least, felt real. I nodded slightly. "Okay." His eyes flicked back to mine, like he wasn't expecting me to accept that so easily. "But," I added, "you don't get to call it nothing either." Silence. He didn't argue. Didn't agree. Just stood there, caught somewhere in the middle of everything he didn't want to face. And for the first time that night, we weren't touching. Which somehow felt more intense than anything that came before. Because now the question wasn't what just happened. It was what the hell we were supposed to do next. The silence stretched longer than it should have. Melvin stayed near the couch, like there was an invisible line he didn't want to cross again. I stayed by the wall, arms loosely at my sides, trying to steady my breathing like any of this could still pass as normal. It couldn't. Not anymore. "We should just go to sleep," he said finally, voice quieter now. Less defensive. More tired. It sounded like an escape plan. "Yeah," I said. Neither of us moved. That was the problem. Even now, with everything said, or half said, there was still something pulling at the space between us. Not physical this time. Something heavier. Unfinished. Melvin let out a breath and grabbed the back of his neck, pacing once like he needed to burn off whatever was still running through him. "This is gonna mess things up," he muttered. I leaned back slightly against the wall. "It already has." He didn't argue. That was new. Usually, he'd push back. Joke it off. Deflect. But now, he just nodded once, like he knew there was no point pretending otherwise. "I don't want it to," he added. That made me look at him properly. "Then don't treat it like it's nothing." He glanced up at that, something sharper in his expression. "I'm not," he said. "You are," I replied, not harsh, just steady. "You keep calling it a mistake." His jaw tightened again, but there was less frustration this time, more conflict. "Because I don't know what else to call it," he admitted. That felt closer to the truth. I pushed off the wall, closing some of the distance, not all of it, just enough that we weren't standing on opposite sides of the room anymore. "Then don't label it yet," I said. "Just don't lie about it either." He watched me carefully, like he was trying to figure out what I was asking from him. "What do you want from me, Henry?" It wasn't defensive. It was honest. And that made it harder to answer. "I don't know," I said after a second. "But I know I don't want to pretend this didn't happen." Another pause. He looked down, thinking. Really thinking this time, not just reacting. "You ever plan for something like this?" he asked quietly. I almost laughed, but there wasn't anything funny about it. "No," I said. "Have you?" He shook his head immediately. "Not even close." "Yeah," I nodded. "Same." That should have made things easier. It didn't. If anything, it made it more real. Because now there wasn't any script to follow. No easy way to categorize it and move on. Just two people standing in the aftermath of something neither of them expected, but neither of them stopped either. Melvin exhaled slowly, then dropped onto the couch, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. I keep thinking if I just call it a mistake, it'll go away, he said. I leaned against the arm of the couch, watching him. Does it? He let out a quiet, humorless laugh. No. Yeah, I said softly. Didn't think so. Another silence. But this one wasn't as sharp. It felt different. Less like something we were avoiding, more like something we were sitting with. Melvin rubbed his hands together, then looked up at me again. I don't want things to be weird between us, he said. They already are, I replied. He huffed slightly. You know what I mean. I did. And for a second, I thought about giving him an easy out. Saying we could just ignore it. Go back to how things were. But that would have been a lie. And we'd already done enough of that tonight. They don't have to be bad, I said instead. Just different. He held my gaze for a second longer this time. Different how? I shrugged slightly. We figure it out. That word hung there. Figure it out. Not avoid it. Not bury it. Deal with it. Melvin leaned back into the couch, running a hand through his hair again, slower this time. You're way calmer about this than I expected, he said. I'm not calm, I admitted. I'm just not pretending. That seemed to hit him in a way the other things hadn't. Because he nodded slowly, like something clicked. Yeah, he said under his breath. I guess I've been doing that. I didn't respond. He already knew. A few seconds passed, then he glanced toward the hallway. I'm gonna try to sleep, he said, though it sounded more like an attempt than a plan. Okay. He stood up, hesitated for half a second, just long enough that I noticed, then walked past me. For a moment I thought that was it. That we'd leave it there. But right before he disappeared into his room, he stopped. Didn't turn around. Just stood there. Henry, he said. Yeah? A pause. Long enough to matter. That wasn't. He started, then exhaled. It wasn't nothing. My chest tightened slightly. I know, I said. He nodded once, still not looking at me. Then he went into his room and closed the door. And just like that, I was left standing there alone, in a space that felt completely different than it had a couple hours ago. Nothing dramatic had happened on the surface. No big declarations. No clear answers. Just a line crossed. And neither of us willing, or able, to step back over it. And the worst part? I had a feeling this wasn't the last time. I didn't sleep. Not really. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying everything over and over like my brain was trying to make it make sense. Or maybe just trying to find the exact moment where I should have stopped it. The problem was, I couldn't. Because there wasn't just one moment. There were a dozen. And I ignored every single one. Sometime around 3 a.m., I heard his door open. Soft. Careful. I froze instantly, even though I wasn't asleep. Footsteps in the hallway. A pause. Then the kitchen light flicked on. I stayed in bed for a second, debating whether to ignore it. Pretend I didn't hear anything. But that felt stupid. So I got up. When I walked into the kitchen, Melvin was leaning against the counter, glass of water in his hand. He looked up the second I stepped in, like he'd been expecting me. Of course he had. Hey, he said. Hey. Same word. Completely different meaning now. For a second, either of us moved. Then I leaned against the opposite counter, keeping some distance between us. You didn't sleep either? I asked. He let out a quiet breath, shaking his head. Not even close. Yeah. Same. Another silence. But this one wasn't as tense as before. It was quieter. More honest. Like we'd both run out of ways to avoid it. Melvin took a sip of water, then set the glass down, staring at the counter for a second before speaking again. I keep thinking about it, he admitted. I didn't play dumb. Yeah? He nodded slightly. And it's not going away. I watched him for a moment. Do you want it to? That made him look up. Really look at me. And for the first time since all of this started, he didn't answer right away. I don't know, he said finally. That was the most honest thing he'd said all night. I nodded slowly. That's fair. He frowned slightly, like he expected me to push harder. You're not gonna make this harder than it already is? He asked. I shrugged. It's already hard. A small, tired smile pulled at the corner of his mouth. Yeah, he muttered. That's one way to put it. We stood there for a second, just looking at each other. And the thing was, the tension was still there. It hadn't gone anywhere. If anything, it felt clearer now. Less chaotic. More real. Melvin exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair again. I meant what I said earlier, he added. About it not being nothing. I know. And I also meant that it's a bad idea. I know that too. He let out a quiet laugh. So we're just fully aware we're screwing this up then? Pretty much. Another pause. Then he asked, quieter this time. Do you regret it? That one hit differently. I thought about it for a second. About everything that could go wrong. About how complicated this was about to get. About him, standing there, looking at me like that. No, I said. His expression shifted slightly. Yeah, he said after a second. Me either. And that should have been the moment we stepped back again. Set boundaries. Created space. But instead, we just stood there. Not moving. Not leaving. Like we were both waiting for the other person to break first. Melvin's eyes flicked down for a second, then back up. You're really not gonna stop me, are you? He asked quietly. I held his gaze. You didn't stop me either. That was all it took. He crossed the distance first this time. No hesitation. No pretending. Just a quiet kind of certainty, like he'd already made the decision before he even moved. And when he stopped in front of me, close enough that I could feel the heat from him again, he didn't reach for me right away. Still a mistake, he said under his breath. I almost smiled. Yeah, I said. Probably. A second passed. Then another. And then. Okay, he murmured. Like he'd given himself permission. His hand came up again, slower this time, more deliberate. Like he actually understood what he was doing now, and chose it anyway. And when he leaned in, it didn't feel like confusion anymore. It felt like something we were both walking into fully aware. And not stopping anyway. That second, okay, changed everything. Not because anything dramatically new happened in that moment, but because, for the first time, it didn't feel like an accident. It felt like a decision. And that made it heavier. After that, we didn't talk much. Not that night. Not after the kitchen. We both knew we'd crossed from confused into something way harder to ignore, and neither of us had the energy to unpack it at 3 a.m. So eventually, we separated again. Not awkwardly. Not abruptly. Just quietly. Like two people who both understood that whatever this was, it wasn't over. The next morning was worse. Not explosive. Not dramatic. Just weird in a way that got under your skin. I woke up late, later than usual, and for a second everything felt normal. Sunlight through the blinds, the low hum of traffic outside, the kind of quiet that usually meant Melvin had already been up for a while. Then I remembered. And just like that, my chest tightened. I stayed in bed for a minute, debating whether to get up or just avoid him entirely. But that wasn't really an option, was it? So I got up. When I walked into the kitchen, he was already there. Of course he was. Leaning against the counter, coffee in hand, scrolling through his phone like nothing had changed. Except everything had. He looked up when he heard me. And there it was again, that split second where either of us knew what version of ourselves we were supposed to be. Morning, he said. Morning. Too normal. Almost suspiciously normal. I grabbed a mug, mostly just to have something to do with my hands. For a second, I thought he was going to ignore it. Let it sit there, unspoken, like maybe if we both acted casual enough it would just fade. But then, "You good?" he asked. I glanced at him. "Define good." He huffed slightly, like he expected that answer. "Not freaking out," he clarified. I shrugged. "I'm not freaking out." "Okay, good." Silence again. I poured coffee, leaned back against the counter, mirroring him without really thinking about it. And just like that, we were standing across from each other in the same positions as last night. Only now it felt different. Clearer. More real. Melvin rubbed the back of his neck, then sighed. "This is weird," he admitted. "Yeah." He looked at me, studying my face like he was trying to read something. "You're handling it better than I thought you would." I raised an eyebrow. "You thought I'd lose it?" "Not lose it," he said quickly. "Just, I don't know. Make it a bigger thing." I let out a quiet breath. "It is a big thing." He didn't argue that. Instead, he nodded slowly, like he was finally letting that sink in. "Yeah," he said. "It is." That was new. No deflecting. No pretending it was nothing. Just acknowledgement. And weirdly, that made it easier to breathe. For a second, we just stood there, both of us thinking. Then he asked, "So what now?" That question hung there. Heavy. Because there wasn't a simple answer. There wasn't a label we could just slap on it and move on. There was just this. "I don't think we ignore it," I said. He nodded immediately. "Yeah, no. That's not gonna work. And I don't think we rush to figure it out either." Another nod. "So we're just in it?" he asked. I met his eyes. "Yeah." He exhaled slowly, like that both stressed him out and relieved him at the same time. "Okay," he said. And for once, he didn't follow it up with "this is a mistake." He just stood there. Present. Still conflicted, yeah, but not running from it. And that might have been the biggest shift yet. Because for the first time since all of this started, it didn't feel like he was trying to undo it. It felt like he was actually starting to face it. Even if neither of us had any idea what that meant yet. The weirdest part wasn't what happened. It was how quickly it became normal. Not completely normal, nothing about this was, but within a couple of days, Melvin stopped acting like he needed to run from it every 5 minutes. That didn't mean he understood it. It just meant he stopped pretending it didn't exist. And honestly, that was somehow more dangerous. Because once the tension wasn't being constantly shut down, it had space to grow. It showed up in small ways first. Like how we started sitting closer again, except now either of us pretended it was accidental. Or how conversations lingered a little longer than they used to, like we were both waiting to see if the other would say something real instead of changing the subject. There were moments where it almost felt easy. And that messed with me. Because this wasn't supposed to be easy. It was supposed to be messy, confusing, something we'd trip over and then back away from. But instead, we were adapting to it. Slowly. Quietly. Like it had always been there, just waiting. A few nights later, we ended up back on the couch. Same spot. Same setup. Different energy. No alcohol this time. No distractions. Just the two of us and a half-watched movie either of us cared about. Melvin was quieter than usual, stretched out with one arm along the back of the couch, close enough that I could feel it if I leaned back. I noticed. I didn't move away. After a while, he spoke. "You ever think about how weird this is?" he asked. I huffed lightly. "Constantly." He smirked a little at that, but it didn't last. "I mean it," he said. "Like, a week ago, none of this was even a thing." "Yeah," I said. "A week ago, you also said it was a mistake." He groaned, dragging a hand down his face. "You're never gonna let that go, are you?" "Nope." That earned a real laugh. Short, but real. Then he went quiet again. And after a second, his arms shifted slightly, resting behind me, closer now. Not touching, but close enough to matter. I don't think it was a mistake anymore, he said. That landed harder than I expected. I turned my head slightly, looking at him. Yeah? He nodded once, not looking at me this time. Still don't know what it is, he added. But not that. I held his gaze for a second. That's a start. Silence again. But not uncomfortable. Just heavy in a different way. Then, without overthinking it, I leaned back slightly. Not fully. Just enough. And his arm, already there, ended up resting naturally behind my shoulders. Neither of us commented on it. But neither of us moved away either. That okay? He asked after a second, quieter now. I didn't look at him. Yeah. Henry? Yeah? He hesitated. And I could feel it, not physically, but in the way his arm tensed slightly, like he was debating something. I'm trying not to screw this up, he admitted. I let out a slow breath. You might anyway. He huffed softly. That's reassuring. I'm serious, I said, turning my head slightly toward him. This isn't simple. You don't get to half in and expect it to stay easy. That hit. I could tell. Because his posture shifted, more focused now. I'm not half in, he said. I raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? He met my eyes then. And for once, there wasn't hesitation. I'm trying not to be, he said. That was probably the most honest answer he could have given. And weirdly, it was enough. The movie kept playing in the background, but neither of us were watching anymore. The space between us felt smaller now. Not because we moved closer, but because something unspoken had shifted again. Less uncertainty. More awareness. After a while, I felt his arm move slightly, not pulling me in, not forcing anything. Just resting more comfortably. Like he'd stopped overthinking every small contact. And that felt bigger than anything else. Because Melvin wasn't reacting anymore. He was choosing. Slowly. Carefully. But still choosing. I don't regret it, he said suddenly. I glanced at him. Still? Still, he confirmed. I nodded once. Good. He looked at me for a second longer. Do you think this is gonna end badly? Honest question. No joking. No deflection. I thought about it. Probably, I said. He let out a quiet laugh. Yeah, figured. But that doesn't mean it's not worth figuring out, I added. That made him pause. Really pause. And then, slowly, he nodded. Yeah, he said. And this time, there was no hesitation in it. We didn't define anything that night. Didn't label it. Didn't try to force it into something neat and understandable. We just stayed there. Closer than before. More certain than before. Still messy. Still complicated. But no longer pretending it was a mistake. And somehow, that made it feel a lot more real. It didn't fall apart all at once. I think that's what surprised me the most. For something that started so messy, so full of hesitation and denial, you'd expect it to crash just as hard. But it didn't. It unraveled slowly. At first, things actually got better. Melvin stopped pulling away every time things got real. He didn't call it a mistake anymore. Didn't try to rewrite what happened like it was some weird, one-time slip. Instead, he leaned into it. Not recklessly. Not perfectly either. But enough that it felt like we were actually building something instead of just reacting to whatever was happening between us. We started spending more time together, not just because we lived together, but intentionally. Late-night talks turned into a regular thing. Little touches stopped feeling accidental. And somewhere in all of that, it stopped feeling temporary. Which, in hindsight, was probably the problem. Because I started expecting it. Not in a dramatic way. Just quietly. I expected him to stay close on the couch. Expected the way his voice softened when it was just us. Expected that whatever this was, it was moving forward. But Melvin? He was still figuring himself out. And I think I forgot that. It hit one night. Nothing special about it. Just another evening, same as the others. Except this time, something felt off the second he walked in. He was quieter. Not the thoughtful kind of quiet. The distant kind. You good? I asked, watching him drop his keys on the counter. Yeah, he said quickly. Too quickly. I didn't push right away. But I noticed. And as the night went on, it got harder not to. He didn't sit as close. Didn't linger in conversations. Didn't look at me the same way. It wasn't obvious to anyone else. But to me? It was loud. What's going on? I asked finally. We were in the living room again, but this time there was space between us. Real space. Melvin leaned back, exhaling slowly. Nothing, he said. I gave him a look. Don't do that. A pause. Then he rubbed his face, like he was already tired of the conversation. I've just been thinking, he admitted. About? He hesitated. And just like that I knew. That's not a good sign, I said quietly. He let out a small, humorless laugh. Yeah. I figured you'd say that. Silence stretched between us. Different from before. Heavier. More final. I don't know what I'm doing, Henry, he said eventually. There it was. Not I don't know what this is. Not this is a mistake. Just that. And somehow, it hit harder than everything else. You didn't know before either, I said. I know, he replied. But before it felt like I had time to figure it out. And now? He looked at me then. And I could see it. Not confusion. Not even denial. Just reality catching up to him. Now it feels real, he said. I swallowed slightly. It is real. I know. Another pause. Then he added, quieter. And that's what's messing with me. I leaned back, taking that in. Because I understood what he meant. This wasn't some hypothetical thing anymore. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't just a mistake. It had become something that actually mattered. And that scared him. So what are you saying? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Just stared at the floor like he was trying to find the right words and coming up short. I'm saying, he started then stopped. Then finally, I don't know if I can be what you need this to be. That was it. No dramatic ending. No big speech. Just the truth. And honestly, that hurt more than anything else could have. I nodded slowly. Okay. He looked up, surprised. That's it. What do you want me to say? I asked. You're being honest. Yeah, but. But what? I cut in gently. You want me to fight you on it? Try to convince you? He didn't answer. Because he knew that wouldn't fix anything. The silence that followed wasn't tense. It wasn't awkward. It was just quiet. Like something had settled. Not in a good way. But in a final one. I meant it, he said after a moment. When I said it wasn't nothing. I know. And I don't regret it. I nodded. I know that too. Another pause. Then I added. Doesn't mean it's enough. That one landed. He didn't argue. We didn't end things dramatically. No storming out. No cutting words. Just distance. Slow, steady distance. Over the next few weeks, things shifted back. Not completely. Not like before. But enough that we found a new version of normal. One where we still talked. Still lived together. Still laughed sometimes. But didn't cross that line again. And yeah, sometimes I caught him looking at me. Like he was remembering it too. But neither of us said anything. Because some things don't need to be repeated to still exist. Looking back, I don't think he was wrong. It probably was a mistake to start something he wasn't ready for. But the part he never admitted? He didn't stop. Not really. He just couldn't keep going. And me? I don't regret it either. Because for a while, it was real. Even if it didn't last. And honestly, that's the part that stayed with me the most. Not the way it ended, but the fact that he said it was a mistake. And then chose it anyway.